How now?
I've learned how to come to terms with myself and my given circumstances, which means I embrace sacrifice. I will not sit and wait for a moment for the best to come. I know how to create it. I've always had to make the best of things, and I still continue to do so. Tired of always making the best of things, but I won't stop.
How's it going?
It's going great. It's going great. Thanks so much for joining us on How Now. So, you've spent the past 2.5 years, 3 years in Buffalo, documenting various different things for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. How did that come about? How did you end up in that scenario?
So I think when I was like a kid, I actually kind of expected myself to be like a writer, actually. Like I wrote a lot. I was like kind of good in English and things like that, language arts, that kind of thing. But I was also always really into art, and I was taking a lot of like darkroom classes as like a college student, and then kind of took like a photojournalism class with a friend as a one-off. And like I did like one story, and I was like, wow, this is like the most powerful, intimate thing that I've ever done. I have to keep doing this, you know? I was just kind of hooked, like from this one class that was like a super chance, very spontaneous decision.
Oh, that's awesome.
I haven't looked back. Like,
your portraits are awesome. The way that you incorporate the color of, the environment and the tone of the environment to like the person. It just, you get a sense of story from just a photograph, and it's really, really fascinating. So
I appreciate that a lot. That's a really lovely compliment. That's how I want people to think about my work. So that's really, really lovely. I think that process for me is like really funny, because originally I was horrible at portraits. Like my strength was absolutely in just like, kind of like being in documentary situations, which when you're that new at it is, you don't have that much of a skill set to begin with. So you just have so much growing to do and so much learning to do. I started really focusing a lot more on portraiture when I started freelancing in a real way, which was really once I moved to Buffalo. Like I did a lot of freelancing in areas that I lived before, but I didn't have as much access to clients. Like I was kind of living in these rural areas, so I wasn't getting that much work, but I started getting all this work when I got here. And I really started to like look at portraiture as it's just another way to tell a story, but I started to take it really, really seriously and really think about like, color theory in situations, and also, mood is everything. I always ask for as much context about the person or the story as I can. And then I try to formulate whatever situation I might be walking into ahead of time and think about different like indoor situations, outdoor situations, like kind of like really shot listed out in my head. And I try to check all those boxes, but then kind of like roll with that preparation on site. And it very often turns into something completely different than I like had in mind. Because then I'm getting to know this person and working on, you know, building a little bit of a relationship with them and getting a sense of who they are. And then I can really kind of take it from there. So it's like a muscle, you know, it's like something that you build.
And being able to capture like a person who, you know, you don't necessarily agree with, or you don't necessarily, you know, you wouldn't go out and have drinks with or whatever. But being able to, you know, present their opinion in like a non-biased way through photographs is like really difficult, you know. This kind of leads me to like one of the more recent articles that from the New York Times that I've seen your work in. It was the second wave of the coronavirus hitting Western New York and Buffalo in particular pretty hard.
Yeah.
And you know, that photo of the gym with the two guys.
Yeah,
like,
they were doing like a protest workout.
Yeah.
Because it's a gym. And yeah, so I think that it's really important in every situation to remember the humanity in everyone that you're working with, and that everyone has their own backstory that you don't know anything about. And I believe pretty strongly actually that you can connect with anyone. You really can. If you're willing to work at it, however much I may personally disagree with someone, it's my responsibility, and I consider it really sacred to portray them in a way that is truthful and honest. And like, I do always want to set a mood, but the mood needs to like match the story and the person involved. So this is such a tricky thing, and journalists are kind of having a moment right now where we are really having a conversation about impartiality. And is that really possible? And what does that mean? And what is the role of the news and journalists in delivering information? And, the way that you tell a story, the language that you use, the way that you photograph something, the angles that you choose, the distance that you show. I mean, photographs can lie just as much as anything else can.
Big time.
And so that responsibility to be respectful of people and truthful is, it's sacred to me, but I tend to process my emotional journey through different situations after I get home. So there's definitely times when I kind of come home and I'm like, wow, where was I? What happened? What was that? But like, I had a conversation where I'm like, that was fucking wild.
What do you look for in your photographs before you submit?
In a documentary situation, my primary focus is always going to be, is this truthful? And is it truthful? Like, does it track with this particular storyline that we are following? There are times when I have photographs that are like cool photographs, but they're not really accurate to the story that we're working on. They're like kind of like a tangent. And they might be like really, really striking, but it's deceptive because it doesn't match what happened. It's just this really big moment. And then if you submit that picture or you use that picture, it's kind of like lying to people because it's not the tone of what was there. Does this show the scene? Does this tell the story? And thirdly, is it beautiful? Because I really do want my photographs to be beautiful. And if they're, sometimes there are ones that are truthful, but they're just not visually strong, right? So those are probably not going to make it. Those ones get culled out of the bunch.
Yeah, and like that's a real interesting aspect of the whole freelance gig working in news, because you have to create these images in a way that you know has to be relevant in a day, or do you think that there's like an aspect of, but also can be timeless?
Photo editors are so crucial in this process because they are people who they look at images all the time. So like in the sort of workflow, like the real curator is, I mean, you're sort of like the initial draft, and then you go, you send off your imagery to a photo editor who is, they're incredibly talented and experienced and look at imagery all the time. And so they are the ones who make the final calls about which images will run. Like I like to send a wide edit in, like a wide selection of imagery for that reason, because an editor may and often will see something that I, in the heat of the moment, with being so close to it, missed.
Yeah, and I think that being able to create beautiful narratives through images that put people in their objective environment, when we're able to reflect on ourselves individually in that type of way, to get that forest from the trees like perception. It's a moment, it's a magical moment. And I think that when an artist is able to do that for a cultural moment, it's really, really impactful.
To truly really be able to do that, I mean, the best work, the best photographic work is from people who have researched, invested in people, in spending time with people and just listening. This is work that people have put their heart into and like researched from, kind of like an academic perspective. Like they looked at the information and then they spent time with, people who are involved, and then they've, taken the time to like try to look at all the complex, sides of this gemstone. It's something, the time I think is so critical, and care and intention, like really, really spending, like learning. Like assignment work is such a like glorious like rush of an opportunity. But like the really great work is made over time. It's just never going to be better than spending more time with people and getting to know them and try to like literally collaborate with where they're coming from.
The cold wind is blowing and the streets are getting dark. I'm writing you a letter and I don't know where to start. The bells will be ringing, St. John the Divine. I get a little lonely every year around this time. The music plays all night in Little Italy. The lights will be going up on old Rockefeller tree. People window shopping on 5th Avenue. And all I want for Christmas is you. Nobody ought to be alone. Nobody ought to be all alone. Nobody ought to be all alone on Christmas. Things are 'cause visions of sugar plums have truly disappeared. And do you remember sleigh riding in the snow and dancing all night to Baby, Please Come Home? Today's celebration is bittersweet. There's mothers and children in the street. Nobody ought to be alone. Nobody ought to be all alone. Nobody ought to be all alone on Christmas. All grown up, but I'm the same, you see. Writing you this letter, 'cause I still believe. Dear Santa, I've been so good this year. Can't you stay a little with me here? Nobody ought to be alone. Nobody ought to be all alone. Nobody ought to be all alone on Christmas. Nobody ought to be alone. Nobody ought to be all alone. Nobody ought to be all alone.